You ever face that crushing moment when the person you trusted the most turns out to be working against you? I thought I understood betrayal the day I received a text telling me I wasn't welcome at my own son's wedding. But that was only the surface. What followed showed me just how far the deception went. My name is Robert, and this is the account of how my son's stepmother attempted to cut me out of his life, and how her own schemes eventually backfired. Let me begin at the start. My son Connor and I had always shared a close bond. When his mother passed away when he was just 12, it was him and me against the world. We built routines, shared inside jokes, and never missed our weekend fishing trips. When I married Helena 4 years ago, I genuinely believed I was giving Connor the complete family he had missed for so long. At first, Helena appeared perfect. She showed kindness to Connor, took interest in his life, and encouraged our father-son connection. She even came up with activities for the two of us to enjoy together. But looking back, I see it for what it was calculated. She was observing, learning our habits and vulnerabilities, quietly figuring out how to position herself between us. The changes began gradually. She would arrange family dinners on the same weekends Connor, and I usually went fishing. She'd suggest that Connor invite friends over during our time together, always smiling, always with a convincing reason. I didn't want to come across as possessive or jealous, so I played along. Then, when Connor met Melissa in college, Helena immediately inserted herself into their relationship. She spent long hours on the phone with Melissa, discussing wedding ideas, career plans, and apartment hunting. She carefully built a role as the guiding maternal figure Melissa had never known. Meanwhile, I found myself being nudged further into the background. When Connor got engaged last spring, the first person he called wasn't me. It was Helena. She cried with joy, instantly moving into talk of venues and guest lists. I only learned of the engagement 2 hours later, when Connor finally remembered to call his own father. From that point, Helena treated the wedding as her personal project. She had opinions on everything: flowers, catering, music, decorations. She and Melissa would spend hours planning, while I was asked for input on one single thing: whether I wanted chicken or fish at the reception. Still, I held on to the belief that I would walk my son down the aisle, that I'd deliver the father of the groom speech, that I was still his dad. 3 weeks before the wedding, Connor phoned me. His voice carried hesitation. He explained that Helena had helped him realize too many parental figures involved in the ceremony might overwhelm Melissa's family. Since Helena had been so deeply involved in the wedding, and because Melissa felt close to her, perhaps it would make more sense for Helena to walk him down the aisle instead. The words hit me like a punch. But Connor sounded so certain, so convinced that it was best. I didn't want to create conflict before his big day, so I agreed, telling myself I was being mature, that I was choosing peace. Then came the second call. The guest list was too crowded, and they needed to trim it down. According to Helena, the day should remain intimate, only for those who had been truly supportive during the engagement. Somehow, I wasn't included. At my own son's wedding, I was no longer invited. Helena had poisoned Connor's view of me, convincing him that my hesitation about her changes showed I was being unsupportive. She pointed to my supposed negativity during wedding planning I was never even invited to. And then, Connor apologized. My son actually told me he hoped I would understand, that he wanted to start his marriage without tension, and that my presence might create awkwardness. I sat in silence, the phone pressed to my ear, stunned. 23 years of raising Connor, and in just 4 years, a woman had managed to erase me from his life. That night, I didn't sleep a single minute. I couldn't shake the thought of how perfectly Helena had staged everything. She had slipped into the role of a devoted stepmother while quietly maneuvering me out of my son's life. None of it was accidental. It was too precise, too rehearsed. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I started online. Helena had always been cautious about what she posted, but through some persistence, I uncovered old accounts under her maiden name. What I found made my stomach twist. Helena had been married not once, but twice before me. And both marriages followed the same troubling pattern. In her first marriage, Her husband's daughter eventually severed ties completely after Helena convinced her that her father was emotionally toxic. With her second husband, his son packed up and moved across the country to escape the chaos surrounding her. There were old forum threads, blog entries, even a newspaper piece that mentioned a custody battle where Helena was accused of parental alienation. It became clear this wasn't coincidence. She had a strategy, a repeatable process: dismantle existing family bonds and rebuild them with herself at the center. But the most shocking discovery came from public records. As I sifted through court documents, I realized Helena's divorce from her second husband had never been finalized. Because of a clerical error, she was still legally married when she married me. That meant my own marriage was invalid. I wasn't just living with a manipulator, I was living with a bigamist who had built her life with me on fraud. At 2 a.m, I sat at my desk staring at the marriage certificate glowing on my computer screen. My so-called wife wasn't just deceitful, she had broken the law while tearing apart my relationship with my son. The wedding was just 5 days away. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer. He confirmed every detail and helped me compile the paperwork. That's when I made my choice. I wasn't going to confront Helena in private. I wasn't going to plead with Connor. No, I was going to expose her in the place she valued most, at the wedding she had orchestrated. On the big day, I drove to the venue but didn't enter the ceremony. Instead, I waited in the parking lot, knowing there would be a receiving line afterward where Helena would be basking in attention, playing the role of the proud stepmother. When the doors finally opened and guests poured out, I walked straight toward the line. Connor saw me first, and his face drained of color. Helena turned, confusion flashing across her features before giving way to fear. "Congratulations on the wedding," I said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "And congratulations on your upcoming bigamy charge." I handed Helena an envelope filled with copies of her marriage certificates, divorce records, and the proof of her deception. Then I gave Connor a second envelope, this one containing screenshots and records of Helena's posts bragging about driving children away from their fathers. "Your stepmother is still married to her previous husband," I announced to the gathering crowd. "Our marriage is invalid. She's been living off fraud for 4 years." Helena lunged for the papers, but Connor was already scanning them. His face shifted rapidly, shock, disbelief, and then horror. "She's done this before," I continued. "She targets men with children, marries them illegally, and slowly poisons their families." Page foreshows her own words, boasting about getting kids to cut ties with their parents. Melissa leaned over Connor's shoulder, reading the evidence. Around us, guests began pulling out phones, recording, whispering. Helena stammered excuses, but the documents were undeniable. And then came the final blow. A process server I had arranged stepped forward. Right there in front of everyone, Helena was served with charges: bigamy, fraud, and a restraining order. In her carefully chosen dress, at the wedding she had tried to control, her mask shattered. An hour later, Connor found me outside. He was still in his tuxedo, though the bow tie hung loose, and he looked years older than he had that morning. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I can't believe I let her convince me you were the problem. I don't know how I didn't see it." We stood there in the parking lot for 2 hours, talking. He told me about the constant little remarks Helena had made, the way she twisted my words, how she made him feel guilty for choosing time with me. Slowly, she had warped his perspective until he doubted his own father. Helena is still fighting the charges, but the courts have already annulled our so-called marriage. As for Connor and Melissa, they're planning a new ceremony, small, private, just close family and friends. This time, I'll be the one walking him down the aisle. And in my speech, I'll talk about loyalty, about seeing manipulation for what it is before it destroys what truly matters. In the end, I didn't have to ruin Helena's life. She did that herself. I just made sure her lies were dragged into the light for everyone to see. If you've ever faced betrayal or manipulation within your own family, remember this: the truth always surfaces. Sometimes all it takes is patience, and the courage to reveal it when the moment comes. Thank you for hearing my story. If you'd like to hear more real accounts of betrayal and justice, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. And don't forget, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from.